The purpose of this video is to help you with problem N3, which has you creating a cash receipts journal. As always, it's a good idea to review the model building checklist before you begin. Your 20 points will be a combination of the points that you earn based on how well you planned the project, if you have the appropriate documentation, if your project is complete and accurate. Appearance will be especially important in this problem, and flexibility, which is usually an issue, will not be such a big deal on this problem because we will be using a journal, and as you know, a journal is a book of original entry and is constantly changing. Some companies use specialized journals and some don't. For some of you, this topic may have been included as an appendix to the chapters that dealt with cash and cash transactions. Regardless of whether you used one or not in your Accounting 100 class, it's a good topic to know. Many programs like QuickBooks use similar logic to enter cash receipts transactions. So let's get a little background in. The cash receipts journal is a specialized journal. A specialized journal groups like-kind transactions together. For companies that use specialized journals, the 4 types of journals that would be used include the sales journal for sales on account, the purchases journal for purchases on account, the cash receipts journal for cash received of any kind. This is the topic of this template. And finally, the cash payments journal for cash payments of any kind. The reason for using a specialized journal is to cut down on repetitive postings that would have to take place if the transactions were recorded in a general journal. There may be a large number of entries into this journal depending on the frequency of cash receipts from customers. A cash receipts journal will allow us to record each transaction on one line instead of the typical 3 to 4 lines on a general journal. The cash receipts journal has separate columns for accounts that are frequently used. Your text suggests that you use columns for the date, the account name, and includes credit columns, or suggests that you include credit columns for the other accounts, for sales, for accounts receivable, and the author also suggests that you use debit columns for sales discounts, and of course one for cash, since every transaction that is recorded in a cash receipts journal involves the receipt of cash. Because this is a book of original entry, there is no need for a data section answer section format because the transactions change daily. Since the information will be changed daily, or in this case weekly, you will enter the transactions directly into the journal that you create. What you see on my spreadsheet is the documentation that I require all of you to do, which includes my name, a file name which you develop and document, and a description of what the template does. Furthermore, I've entered the rough data that your textbook tells me that it would like. Before going any further, I would spend a few minutes Googling cash receipts journal images to get an idea of what a journal would look like in the case where you may not have used one before. I just have the rough data. We're going to spend some time on this one with respect to appearance. It is a journal, which means you should spend time creating the horizontal lines and the vertical lines that you would usually see in a journal. I'm going to pause this while you take a look at some images on the internet or possibly in your textbook, and we'll come back later and talk about some of the things you should consider to earn your participation points. Okay, so I'm back. I spent about 5 to 10 minutes working on the appearance of my journal. In other words, it should look like an actual journal that you've seen in a textbook or you've looked at on the internet. So in this case, I've used the columns that the author suggested I use. Yours does not have to look like this. There's many other options out there for you to use. And I want to record a few transactions with you just in case you've never used a cash receipts journal. So looking at the first set of data on June 1st, put my date in, it says we received $450.80. So let me go to my cash column and put in the $450.80 from Dylan Seekle in payment of a May 26 invoice of $460 less the discount. That means that we would be crediting Dylan Seekle's accounts receivable amount of $460. And the reason that it doesn't balance is because of the discount. So before I calculate that, one thing that drives me absolutely crazy is when someone uses inconsistent decimal places. In other words, right now some of my numbers have 0 decimal places and some have 1. I want them to be consistent. And since we're dealing in dollars and cents, I'm going to go format this to be one of the formats. I used the comma format that will show dollars and cents. My sales discount will cause the debits to equal the credits. And since the terms that Cubberleys Farm offers everyone is 210 net 30, shown at the very top of your page, 210 net 30 means there's a 2% discount offered if they pay within 10 days. Otherwise, the net amount is due in 30 days without the discount. So in this case, they are paying within their allotted time, and they're allowed to take a 2% discount. So 2% of this would be $9.20. And whenever you use the accounts receivable column, you need to go put the customer's name in the account column. That's how the subsidiary ledgers that you learned about in Accounting 100 get updated. So let me make sure I spell his name right. The benefit of using this cash receipts journal is that, again, we recorded a transaction on one line. If we were to record that same transaction in a general journal, we would be using at least 4 lines because we would be showing the debit to sales discount and the debit to cash, one on each line of the general journal, and a credit to accounts receivable, and then we'd have to write a description. So we're cutting down the amount of postings and the amount of lines we're using from 4 lines in a general journal down to 1 in a cash receipts journal. So let's go ahead and do a couple more transactions to make sure you get the hang of it. So on the 3rd, June 3rd, it says we received a loan of $8,000 from First National Bank. Okay, so our cash goes up because we are borrowing money and the bank is giving us $8,000. That's the debit. What would you credit? Well, when you owe somebody money, you need to use some kind of a payable account, and they referred to this one as a loan, so I'll use a loan payable. You notice that we don't have a column for that amount, so I'll go ahead and put it in the other column, and whenever you use the other column, you need to define the account used over here in the account name column. Why? Because in accounting, we don't have a dumping ground called other accounts. We need to tell the user where to post that $8,000. I'm going to call mine loan payable, and if you want, you could even put who it's payable to. Okay, that's another transaction that's done. I'll do one more. On June 4th, it says we received $245. Let me go put that in my cash account. From Alicia Geddes in payment of a May 14th invoice. Okay, it's too late for her to take the discount. That's why it wasn't mentioned. And if we sold it to her previously on May 14th, that amount would be sitting in accounts receivable. So we would credit accounts receivable and we would debit cash. And once again, whenever anything goes in the accounts receivable column, you need to identify the name of the customer whose account you are crediting. In this case, Alicia Geddes. So that's a little bit to get you started. Spend the time to make your work look like an actual journal with horizontal and vertical lines, creating the space to record the transaction. Because this is a multi-column journal, don't forget to ensure that the total of the debits equal the total of the credits. You should show this. Don't make me get my calculator out. Demonstrate this on your Excel spreadsheet. In other words, part of a multi-column journal means totaling it at the bottom. So let me go choose my single and double underlines, and I think that may be hard for you to see just because of the way Excel is. So let me go shade these totals so you can see them a little bit better. And I think I'm gonna, where am I gonna choose to do that? I think I'll go here to the fill box and choose one of the gray colors just so you can see where the totals are. There we go. And again, part of this is making sure that you total each one of the columns. You guys should be pros at doing this by now. And once I get that formula to work, there we go. I had scroll locked it, so here's my total. Once I get that first one, you can simply use the fill handle to drag it across, and then someplace at the bottom before you're done, show me that the total debits equal the total credits. I shouldn't have to get my calculator out at all. You, as the creator of the template, should ensure that the total debits equal the total credits. So right now, and remember I'm not finished, my total debits would be the sum of these two, and my total credits would be the sum of these three items. And I should show my teacher, or the person that would be using this journal, that the difference between these two hopefully is 0 by the time you're done. Let me finish this off. Again, let me make it look good by placing the appropriate lines. And that's an example of a cash receipts journal. Now, of course, we should make sure that we have the proper headings on everything we turn in. And in case you've forgotten, I've tried to get you guys into the habit of doing a who, what, when, which means I should put the name of the company on the first line, which is Cubberley's Farm Supplies. The name of what it is that we're showing, this is the cash receipt journal, on the second line, or maybe I should put pluralized cash receipts. Put an S on there. And the third line is going to change, but again, it's a journal, so it's okay if the user has to go in. This first one happens to be for the week ended June 7th. And of course, this needs to look decent. You can play around with the appearance, but definitely we would expect to see centered titles. You can play around with the various color options. Maybe I'll make it black and white. Again, you guys learned all this stuff in the first few lessons. and it should be pleasing to the eye. It should look nice, and when you print it out, think about how that looks to the user as well. I see a spelling mistake, so again, I've told you this in the past, always consider spell checking it. There's lots of ways to do that. I'm going to go to the Review tab and choose the spelling option, and it did catch my mistake, so I will change that, and it will not catch the user's names because they're not normal words. So I'm done with the spell checker. It looks like a nice, neat template. When I print it, it should be centered. We've talked about ways to fix that. So hopefully that gives you some hints on creating the cash receipts journal. One more thing I want to point out to you. Make sure you follow the directions for creating the chart. When you read about the chart item at the bottom, it asks you to create a 3D column chart showing the amount of cash that Cubberleys Farm collected from each credit customer. That's key. From each credit customer during the second week of June. Take a minute to look over those transactions from the second week. How many cash receipts from credit customers do you see? Take a moment and look at those 5 transactions from June 8th to June 14th. I see 3 transactions involving credit customers. This means that your chart should have 3 bars or 3 columns. As always, use a 3-line heading on your chart. Include data labels. Make your template and your chart be the best it can be. I look forward to reading your updates, and as always, I'm here to help.